Life is full of celebrations, birthdays, holidays, life milestones, and so much more. And who has been helping generations of families celebrate these events? Our friends at Dewey's Bakery. And even if you aren't planning for something in the near future, you don't have to wait to enjoy something savory and delicious from Dewey's. Maybe you just need something to get you through your Mondays. Drop by every Monday for a free Cake Square Day. No purchase necessary. Just come celebrate the start of a new week. So, if you're hearing this ad on a Monday and you're in your car, reset that GPS and get to one of their 3 Triad locations immediately in Winston-Salem at Thruway and Renolda Manor, plus one in Greensboro at Friendly Shopping Center. And any day of the week, you can find the perfect item with fast and easy ordering options at local.deweys.com. Plus, Dewey's does so much to help celebrate our community. To date, they've given back over $4 million to local schools, churches, and other nonprofits. Your next celebration isn't complete without something special from Dewey's Bakery. Dewey's. Celebrate every day.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone. Appreciate you joining us for another financial episode with Jennifer Johnson, our certified financial planner. She is with Three Magnolias Financial Advisors, located right here in Winston-Salem, the heart of the Triad. And today we're going to have a conversation about something that, like a lot of topics that we have, I am very much a novice, very much an amateur, and that's why Jennifer is on this show, because she is the person we go to with a lot of these topics and questions. And so today, we talk, Jennifer, a lot on this show about assets and investments, right? What are appreciating assets? What are depreciating assets? You have cars, which are depreciating assets. You have real estate, which can be an appreciating asset. But today we're going to talk about something that has become big business, big industry. But some people maybe also look at it more as an investment as well, because in a lot of ways it can be an appreciating asset. So with that, tell us a little bit about what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, and I had to, like our last conversation, bring in some reinforcements because you think of yourself as a novice, Adam. This is also an area where I would call myself a novice also, because I read a very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal in the last few months about Pokemon cards. And I know enough to be dangerous about Pokemon. And I thought maybe Austin Childress, who's another one of our advisors here, might have more to add. So welcome, Austin. I'm glad you're here to help us out and educate us on Pokemon.
Yeah, glad to be. I'll try to keep the nerd speak to as low as possible.
Well, let me start with this, Austin. You listened to the way that I set this up. Is that an accurate portrayal of what we want to talk about in terms of the value of whether it's Pokemon cards or any other collectible that's out there, the way some people look at it of a certain age?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you look at, my age group, this late 20s, early 30s group who grew up when these things were coming out, specifically Pokemon, what came out in 96. And so right around the time that I was born, so it was like a big part of my childhood. And as kids, we were very interested in it for, the intended purpose, the fun. And then now I think a lot of my peers who are still kind of have a hand in that world do look at it more as, oh wow, this is a way to have something that I enjoy now and am still investing in my future with it. And so it's kind of a blend of two things.
Sorry, Austin. I don't know. I know my kids had some Pokemon cards, but they weren't particularly into it. Only one of them. So we might have to explain to people what a Pokemon card is for those of us that are older and don't have kids. And I'll ask you to do that for us. But just so folks know too, why are we talking about Pokemon cards? I saw this article I mentioned. The title is "The Hot Investment with a 3,000% Return?" A question mark, and the answer was Pokemon cards. And I thought that was very interesting because I knew them as a parent. These cards with these kooky little characters on them that you would sort of trade. And I think there's some games too, right, that you can play with it. But I thought investment, I mean, what in the world? It was a whole world that I had not really, even though I'm in the investment space, obviously investments are a big part of what we do and helping people achieve like their big most important goals. I had never considered, a Pokemon card as an investment. So tell us more about what you know about Pokemon. And Adam, I think your kids have had some too, right? So
Yeah, they have. They are not at the age where they're looking at it as long-term investments, but
yeah.
like the tagline says, you got to catch them all. So that's
That's
their
right.
goal with these.
Yeah, that's right. So what are they, Austin? For you grew up with them, right?
Yeah.
So you probably have the most experience with them.
Yeah, and so Pokemon is a Japanese cartoon that came to America in the late 90s. It was brought in English, and with it came the cards that are just like any other trading cards, really, like you would think of traditionally with baseball or football or any other sport. Um, and there is a game that is played that it goes with the cards, so there's kind of that dual element to them of some people collect them to play the game and some people collect them just to enjoy, to reminisce, to look at them, that kind of thing. So if you go all the way back, I'll give you a huge outlier, kind of the holy grail of Pokemon cards.
Okay.
One of the most popular Pokemon, the name is Charizard. It's a dragon. It is, what every kid in the 90s and early 2000s would have wanted. So the base set, the first set that came out in America of Pokemon cards in 96, had a Charizard in it. And if you were lucky enough to get that and save it in good condition to now, you'd be looking at around $6,000.
Oh,
Something
wow.
that you
Okay.
probably bought in a pack that's a dollar or two a piece at that time.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and
Wow.
the without going too far, one of the interesting elements of trading cards is that there's this grading system that exists now where you can send the cards off to a third party company. Its abbreviation is PSA. I believe it's professional sports something, but they do other types of trading cards now. And they basically give you a grade out of 10 on the quality of your card. And so if it has no issues with the corners or scratches on it, that kind of thing, they might give you a 10, and that just exponentially increases the value. If you were to have that same Charizard graded in a PSA 10, you'd be looking at around $250,000.
Oh my God, really? Wow.
And so
Wow.
obviously very, very outlandish, and that card would definitely be an outlier, just because it is one of, I believe it's like over 100 cards in that first base set.
Mhm.
But that's kind of the cap that we're looking at here of
Wow.
the individual cards. And then a whole nother side of the market is sealed products. So similar to, something I know you're going to talk about, Jennifer, with, Beanie Babies, more like,
Mhm.
traditional kind of collectible type things that you would think about. I know like some people collect shot glasses, that kind of thing. So sealed product in Pokemon is a huge aspect of the market. I don't know right off the top of my head what a sealed box of that first edition set would be. But I know that at one point when the markets were extremely hot for Pokemon cards, it was in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. You're
Wow.
talking
So
about
if you
something
had, and
that,
by sealed product, do you mean like you bought that original box or
yeah,
set and then you just didn't open it, right?
exactly,
Like you like
exactly,
foresight. Uh,
exactly. And so it feels weird to say this, but back in the day, um,
right.
Back in the
it,
day of the 90s.
right,
Yeah.
you'd go
Right.
up to you can go in any Walmart and probably buy 10 or 15 of these boxes for maybe $40 a piece or $30 a piece,
Right.
and
Right.
now you're looking at 25 to 30 years later,
Yeah.
about 20 to $30,000 on your initial
Yeah.
investment. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
think
like I
that's
said, those are outliers. Just because it is so long ago, we're coming up on the 30th anniversary, but
right.
the market is still really hot. Like since COVID happened, there's been this huge turnaround of people really buying and it's across the trading card
Yeah.
space. It's baseball cards, football cards as well. Disney has trading cards now, so
Oh, okay.
you can imagine Disney. The characters and the names that come with that. If you're familiar with Frozen, I believe the Elsa card that came out like just over a year ago is like over $1,200. Just if you were to
Wow.
go online on eBay and try to buy one. And so,
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was interesting to me in that same article that I saw, it had a chart, a mountain chart, if you will, like of the returns, of like Pokemon. It also had baseball cards on there, and of course, it was comparing that to like the S&P 500, which is an index for something that follows the stock market in general and kind of what those returns have been. And I noticed exactly what you said, Austin, like around 2020, like and I have a feeling it has something to do with COVID and us all being like trapped in our homes. But like these values of these, collectible cards, particularly the Pokemon cards, like really skyrocketed. And I thought that was very interesting to like see what is going on, with that and what made that spike. But I think what jumped out to me in the article, and I'll send this to you, Adam, too, so that you can link that for folks that might be interested in reading it. But of course, it points out how that the Pokemon cards, if you look at it just over that time frame, have beaten some really high flying tech names that have done super well, but not as well as Pokemon cards, during that window. And then also the person they talked to, one particular person who happened to be 27, so kind of right in your time frame there, Austin, too, who had actually he had an investment in Pokemon cards that he used to buy an engagement ring, actually. So he hit it big, I guess. I don't know if he says which card, or I probably didn't know enough about cards like you do, Austin, too. I know which one he sold, but he sold enough to make that to buy an engagement ring. And it just struck me because he was quoted in the article as saying he views the cards as similar investments to his Roth IRA or brokerage accounts, which I thought was really interesting because to me, it obviously looks to me like, wow, that's very different, than investing in the stock market or in real estate or something like we've talked about before. But I wonder if the attitudes aren't out there. And this is something maybe you could speak to this somewhat, Adam, maybe, or Austin, of people you talk to, or do they see like investing in these cards or other collectibles as equivalent to your 401k at work or some other type of investment?
Yeah, I'll say that it's not something I've ever considered. I mean, I used to collect baseball cards when I was a kid, and so I'm trying to even think about if I was going out and collecting cards. I think for me, I would collect them in the hopes of maybe be able to put something together that would be worth some money.
Right.
But I never really looked at it as an investment that would help me contribute to retirement or anything.
Right.
It would just, it'd give me spending money or something that I could splurge on something. That's kind of the way that I looked at the
Sure.
investment when it came to collectibles. Um, but I could certainly see, and I have a lot of follow-up questions maybe for Austin about just the market unpredictability of collectibles in the same way we talk about the stock market unpredictability. But
Right.
I'll first see what Austin has to say about people treating these investments in a similar way that they would their 401k.
yeah, I definitely think that there are people that are trending that way. Um,
Mhm.
just because they're starting to see it as an opportunity. And I do think that you kind of run into an ethical question somewhere along the line of, this is something that was created and designed for kids to enjoy. It's a
Yeah.
kids TV show and a kids game. That, there's only so much product available, there's only so much supply. And so if adults, who have no other interest in the original intent of the
Yeah.
game or the
Interesting.
hobby,
Yeah.
start bombarding and creating all this demand, is that
That's
going to hurt it?
That's true. That's interesting because I think I do remember hearing stories about adults just like plowing through kids like at a Target to like get to these cards when they first put them out there, right? So I'm
It is
sure
very
those,
much happening.
those stories are out there. Like, yeah, that's super crazy, I think. And I wonder if part of it is this is maybe just because one reason I like to do this because I do believe in financial education. Like part of it I feel like is maybe people that are really into that are like, I know Pokemon, I understand them, I understand the characters if you grew up with it, but maybe they don't understand the stock market, right? And so I feel like maybe part of it is like people are like, I know this, I don't know anything about the stock market. So like they almost feel safer in my mind. Like, and I could be wrong. I want to hear what you guys think about that. Of course, we would tell them the opposite, right? That the deck is stacked against you in these collectibles. I mean, odds of getting that card, I don't know exactly, and then leaving it sealed or not having your kid or dog chew on it, like have to be very low, right? Whereas we know investing in the market, if you are diversified and patient and match your risk profile to your investment strategy, odds are more in your favor, right? So that's what I would say to people. But I just wonder if those attitudes aren't out there that like I know what I'm doing, right? And I know understand this and feel like it's safer or just as good as even some of those other traditional investments.
Yeah, there's so much risk associated with really any collectible, and this is not immune to it. I think we have almost now 30 years of proof that these do appreciate.
Mhm.
There's almost no products, maybe not even any, that are now worth less than they were at MSRP whenever they were released. Um,
Mhm.
but the all the things you mentioned, Jennifer, are factors. Like, do you have space to accommodate storing these things for 15 to 20 years? How do you go about selling them? Because it's not like, the stock market where you can just
Right.
submit a trade and
Right.
move away from this asset. You have to be savvy enough to at least know how to use eBay or some sort of like peer-to-peer, selling platform. And if you aren't comfortable doing that and you go the route of, some sort of like more corporate, you're going to get a way lower return because they're not buying things at 100% market value. They're buying them at 60, 70% to resell them then at 80, 90, 100% market value.
Mhm.
And then, the condition nowadays, it's really hard to go into a store and just buy one of these products, whether that be from, theft or this like really, really high demand. These products are not as accessible as they used to be. And so a lot of the time you're ordering online and you would be surprised, like these boxes of trading cards come in, these plastic wrappings, and there's almost always issues with it. And even just a small, like pen tip sized tear can reduce the value of a sealed product by,
Mhm.
10, 20%. And so a lot of risk and a lot of what if type factors. Um, and just one kind of interesting point on that is I think Pokemon, Disney's trading cards, any sort of trading card that comes out of a show or something that's fictional has a better chance of reducing risk than like a sports trading card because these
Okay.
characters in these shows and these games, they're not going to go out and get a DUI. They're not going to
Oh,
have
that's an interesting
something
thought.
cancel them.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
if you're familiar with baseball, there was a very highly touted prospect a few years ago. He was like 19 coming out of, I think, the Dominican Republic. And he got involved in some things that, got him out of baseball really quickly. And his cards went from extremely expensive to worth nothing.
Yeah,
Like,
you're talking about Wander Franco.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so almost overnight, like
Wow.
you can just lose the entire value whenever it's a real person on the card as opposed to
Mhm.
fictional characters that people are going to
That's
love.
Thought, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
Our collectibles, Austin, I don't want to put this in any absolutes because there's no way to predict any of this stuff, but do you find that the collectibles could be more immune from like crashes or recessions than the stock market might be?
Yeah, I think to a degree they move in tandem because when people have more money and the economy is stronger, you're going to see more demand for these type of things because people have more flexible money. But at the same time, the bounce backs have been, or the dips have been, they've been low and the bounce backs have been high, similar to the stock market. I saw a really interesting chart a few years ago whenever the post-COVID jump started to hit where Bitcoin and Pokemon, like the market on
Yeah.
Pokemon cards, moved very similarly, which is
Oh,
kind of interesting. And I think there's a lot to be said about there's people in both spaces, or similar people in both spaces, that just they have a special interest in cryptocurrency and in these types of collectibles,
mhm.
probably somewhat because of what Jennifer mentioned. They just don't feel like they quite understand how the stock market works, but maybe they do understand these other kind of more alternative investments. And yeah, I would say I would never I would never be bold enough to recommend someone include, 10% of their contributions towards their retirement in a collectible like this. Like it's just there's too much unknown. I would say if someone is knowledgeable about these things, feels like, they have a good understanding and they have extra money to that they want to put into retirement, that it might be worth, trying and uh, exploring that as an option.
I want to take a quick break from this show to do two things. One, we'll say thank you for listening and supporting the Triad Podcast Network. Just listening to this episode is appreciated. Second, I want to ask that you support a local business that supports us as a presenting partner, a real estate company we trust, the Ginther Group, located in Winston-Salem. The housing market is moving fast. You need someone you can rely on to assess your situation, read the data and trends, and steer you in the right direction. Interest rates, inventory, new construction, there are so many factors that impact our local market. Don't buy into the national internet headlines. Get the information from the folks right here in our neighborhood. Contact Blake Ginther and the Ginther Group today. Whether you're buying or selling, have cash or not, or if your home isn't in the ideal condition for selling, chances are they have a solution for you. Call 336-283-8689 or visit theginthergroup.com. Buying, selling, investing, or just learning, whatever you need. Start now and, like me, you can become a Ginther Group client for life.
You know what I would, and I'll be curious if you would say the same thing to somebody, Austin, if somebody asked me about it, which I'll be honest, no client has really asked me about it. This is a world like I was just like shocked, that was kind of out there. I don't think, it's really hasn't come up in conversation, but I'm just thinking hypothetically, if somebody did, I mean, to me, this would be the kind of money you would go to Vegas with, it would be like, okay, you're doing all the other things right, all the things we talk about, like you're paying down debt, you've got your emergency fund, you've got health insurance, you're doing your 401k at work, all those things. And then you've got like some play money and it's something you love, and you want to do it. I don't think it hurts to do that. I think it would concern me if somebody saw that as an alternative to all of the traditional investments, because I'm older, right? And so I remember Beanie Babies, and I don't know if anybody else remembers
Oh,
the
yeah.
Beanie Babies, like of seeing things that come out and are very hot and, very expensive for a while. And I just think it's so hard to know, because to get that go from like, what was it, like $20 or whatever to $250,000, return, you have to have the foresight when those are first released to know like this is going to be a hot item, and then hold it, like you said, perfectly conditioned for like what, 30 years, because you really don't see any appreciation in these cards until around when COVID hits, right? So you have to like have that kind of foresight and like what's coming out now. I certainly wouldn't, feel comfortable with that, but you don't want to bet the farm, on getting that one right. That feels like the deck is stacked against me, but I don't know. Would you tell somebody the same thing? Because you're, much more up to date than I am on these kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because there are some ways that you can look and see trends, like within Pokemon specifically. About every 5 years, there's usually a pretty high jump in the
I was
market,
about to say,
because they
okay.
do anniversary, like special
Uh,
anniversary sets every 5 years. And so we're headed towards the 30th next year, which, as we've seen, the market this year on them has been extremely high.
okay.
Um,
Right. Right.
and there's like some other predictable aspects, like whenever these new sets come out, uh, the prices jump really high during like the pre-order and pre-purchase periods, and then there's a huge drop off immediately after, and then 3 or 4 months down the line, as newer things come out, the older things start to finally appreciate. And so, like I can give one example. I had it pulled up just doing some extra research this morning. A set that came out this summer uh, was at release. The cost about $160 MSRP for the biggest box of cards that you could buy. It was up to about $500 at one point during the pre-buy and like pre-order process, because high demand and low supply right now. And then now it's starting to just now tick back up to that 450-ish dollar mark.
Okay.
Um, as it was, and it was down all the way in like 180, 190, that area, or like right after release. And
Mm.
so yeah, it's something that there's a little bit of predictability in it, but it's very involved. Is the
Yeah.
problem, is it's involved and it requires a ton of space and patience. And so
Yeah. It reminds me too of I think we're mostly probably talking about people with what I would call relatively low net worth, like maybe young people, some discretionary income enough, and maybe like likes the nostalgia of it, right? And are like, now it's sort of like legitimate, makes playing with your cards legitimate again now, if we can call it an investment, right? Like, so because it's not weird if you're 30 and you're buying as an investment, but if you're buying them to play, like maybe it's frowned upon. I don't know. Like that might be part of it. And then it also reminds me of people on a very high end, like very high net worth, where they're buying art, for example, they're buying bottles of wine and these other things that you invest in. And I read a really interesting book called The Billionaire's Vinegar a while back, and it was about a lot of the fraud in that like very collectible, very high end wine, where like they would pretend like the wine was owned by Thomas Jefferson, for example. And so I wonder if too, like, I mean, there's fraud in every industry, but I would think there's probably a lot of fraud and scams in this area too, where people would need to be wary.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And most of the time, your efforts to avoid fraud are going to hurt your profit margins
Oh, interesting.
a
Okay.
lot, just because that's where you get into, a lot of people don't like to sell extremely high value products on like eBay or on
Yeah.
some of these other, peer-to-peer sites, just out of fear of getting scammed or, being a victim of fraud. And so they sell to like a YouTuber or, an influencer that, they like, and those folks are trying to turn a profit just like anyone else trying to make a living. And so they're buying, at 50, 60% market value. But there's the
Mhm.
guarantee of they have good reputation, and, they're not going to scam you, that kind of thing. And so your profit margin gets hurt pretty heavily, but you get the convenience and the security. And so it's that trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that feels like a lot of work to me, I guess, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Extremely involved.
all of it does to me, I guess, compared to, because part of what we do is try to make those things kind of simple for folks, right? So that feels like more than I would want to take on, but I guess if you're into into that kind of thing. Adam,
I hear a lot of similarities in this and like investing in real estate, right? You know,
yeah,
it can be a lot of work if you don't have a property management company to do real estate
yeah,
investments,
true,
and you got to keep it in good condition, right? If
right,
if there's
true,
dings and dents and things
yeah,
wrong, it's gonna, you may knock some a little bit off the price as a result of that after an inspection. So yeah, so I think there are some similarities in the characteristics you're describing here that can lead people to understand why this is an investment opportunity for a lot of people.
yeah. I mean, some people would say it's legit, right? I mean, I think you're saying it's legit, right, Austin? As far as like something you see people actually investing in, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of potential. It's just, it's not for everyone. Like
Right,
be
right.
kind of where I land. Uh, you
Yep.
know, I trust 30 years of proof that these things appreciate, and even if they stop making them, I feel confident that them, like, we'll say Pokemon just ended tomorrow and they never produced another card or another TV show or another game. I think that would skyrocket the prices of
Yeah,
these things.
right. Because the
There's no
opposite
longer need.
happened with baseball cards, right?
Right.
Like, didn't they all of a sudden like ramp up a lot of production of baseball cards, like back maybe in the 80s or something? And then because cards, which obviously because it wasn't scarce anymore, like if everybody gets access to the card, it's not as exciting and valuable, right? So I guess you have that risk too, like with something like the Disney cards or whatever, right? So
Yeah, and the
um,
sports trading card industry is a little bit different in that, like I mentioned, you have that risk of, the player or players that you're
yeah,
investing in
injuries
just
or
not
whatnot.
panning out.
Hmm.
Yeah, injuries especially is a
Hmm.
big one. And then there's just more variance in sports cards. They do a numbering system where you might get,
Oh,
say, a Tom Brady card. Well,
right.
regular old Tom Brady card is not going to be as much as a Tom Brady card that on the back has number 14 out of 100 on it. And it's
Okay.
specifically like a short printed version of that card. But at the same time, I think there's a lot more like widespread interest in sports, sports just being
Yeah.
more popular and globally as well. So,
Right. Right. I think I'm just surprised because I thought a few years ago we were just done with collecting stuff. Like, I don't know if anybody else thought that. Like, I
Well,
thought
do you remember NFTs? I thought everyone
I
thought
do.
NFTs were going to be the next
Yeah.
version of what collectibles became, and that came and went, and here we
No,
are with
it's
just still
not
the
what they
stuff you can
were. Like, yeah.
open up a plastic wrapping of something and
Yeah.
put it in a binder, and
Yep.
it's still like we were doing 50 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. I guess these things like come and go, but you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I think, and that's probably why I'm like I have a hint of skepticism, I guess. Like you can probably tell it in my voice. I think we'd probably all agree. Like, I mean, it probably has some potential, but there's much greater risk. I think that's really
Sure.
what we're trying to share here is that there's risk with these that I think. Like I said, what jumped out to me in the article is somebody might look at that just like they might, their 401k, and there are unique risks, I think, when you're putting money toward these collectibles, be they Pokemon cards or art or something else. I mean, I think the payoffs obviously could be huge if it works out, but I don't know the data, but I would think it's a pretty low probability of, you making a really substantial return, on these. And I don't know that, all strategies I think have to be balanced, right? And so if you have, if you end up with too much, of your portfolio in collectibles or
Hmm.
crypto, those should be on like the very speculative end, right? I mean, that's what I would tell people because of all the things you just described. I mean, like you said, a pinprick, all of a sudden, affects the value hugely, let alone finding the having the luck or forethought, I guess, to find the right card and then preserve it. It's just things you don't have to think about, with a traditional stock investment like you might in, a 401k, that you would really prepare for these big goals. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, and I think what I will take away from this as well, Jennifer, in terms of the risk of using this as a long-term investment that you think about in a way you would a 401k is what Austin talked about in terms of just value and how
Yeah.
subjective that can be.
Right.
Are you going to get paid what it's actually worth?
That's
I mean,
right. That's right.
I remember going to these trade shows when I was a kid trying to sell my baseball cards, and it was just kind of understood that the traders at the convention would give you at most 60% of the value of the card.
Right. Right.
And, you know, in a 401k, if you've got $1 million in your account, that's $1 million,
That's
right?
right. Yes. That's right. Yeah.
Whereas
That's right.
if you have a, original Charizard from the mid to late 90s, uh, it could be worth
Hypothetically.
$30,000, but you don't know what someone's actually going to give you for it.
Right. That's right. You got to find a buyer, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're saying, Austin. You got to find the right platform to sell it on. Try
Yeah.
not to get scammed along the way. All those kind of things, right?
Yeah, and some of it comes down to if you're in the ultra high, net worth bracket of Pokemon card collecting, your options of people that are going to buy those things are much, much lower.
Right. They have to
Because
be. Yeah.
you're looking at celebrities and musicians, people like that that have an interest and also have the kind of funds to buy your
Right.
$250,000 card. Not every, just average Joe investor in Pokemon
Right.
has $250,000 lying around, um,
Right.
as opposed to the
Right.
stock market where you're not exactly just trading with other folks. Like
Yeah.
you're working with companies and a lot more money in circulation. And so
Mhm. Yeah, I think I liken it back to we did an episode on sports gambling, right? And sports gambling apps and things like that we learned that some segments of the population were spending a lot of money consistently. And I think there's maybe a different element to there's could be some addiction, right, with gambling. I don't know that these collectibles or Pokemon cards where people are actually have the same addiction to it, but it does worry me a bit, I guess, where people are putting maybe significant parts of their investments towards something that, could work out, but has a much higher probability of not working out. I think when you really think about the amount of money you might put toward it, um, which I don't have any problem with somebody like putting a little money toward it. It's the Vegas money, right? It's the money that if it goes away, like it doesn't sabotage your future. And I may be overthinking it a bit, but I just wonder if there's not part of our population that people also saw, and we found, I think folks, particularly young men in that case, were spending a few hundred to $1,000 a month, on these gambling apps with the idea if they hit it big, they would have this big, return and saw it as an investment. And we as advisors would see that really differently than your other investments. Does it mean you shouldn't do it at all? No, of course not. Like if you have, as I said earlier, if you have all the big things taken care of, and you still have extra cash flow and it's something you enjoy, and maybe it also turns into a value for you, I would have no problem with that. But I would be concerned, if people were putting that serious money toward this.
yeah, absolutely. I think there is an element of the gambling side of to this as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like if I were just to create a scenario where someone had an extra $150 of disposable income a month, and they were very
Right.
much like in the mindset of I want to put this back towards my future, but maybe apart from my already diversified retirement plan. I would very highly encourage them, if they had a knowledge of this market, to if they wanted to buy things, buy them, keep them sealed, buy totes, boxes, however you want to package them, that are, bubble wrapped, like the whole 9 yards, and put them away like somewhere that is safe from weather and that kind of thing. And every, 2 years, recycle, like go back in, pull some of those things out, sell them,
Mm. Oh,
recycle.
okay.
Don't wait, 30 years, because who in the world has enough space for that to keep these
Yeah,
things for 30 years as you've just accumulated more and more and more. But take a
right.
smaller, payout, and keep the product moving around and kind of create
Mhm.
an income stream through that. Um, and there's some life skills in learning how to haggle and to work a market that doesn't
Yeah,
have set values, and maybe one that is kind of lacking just peer-to-peer interaction. And it's not really something that a lot of people
yeah,
are too great at anymore. And so
yeah,
there's some life lessons in there. One that, as I was selling stuff that I had collected, learned to myself. And so, yeah, I would say if the conditions were right, that would be an interesting, way to go about things, and maybe even profitable. But like I said, heavy emphasis on the conditions have to be right. And so,
Well, I think, folks, we have an expert here. If people are looking for advice, on where Pokemon cards, fit into your planning goals, your portfolio, you may not want to call me, as you've heard, but we could certainly have Austin here to help folks out with that. But I have opinions, as I've shared. But I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's just something that um, I had not thought of to until I read that article. But it's a whole other world that we're learning about, and just have to try to help people make prudent decisions, as we navigate these things.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fascinating. I've learned a lot. So, Austin, thank you for sharing some of your knowledge of the market of collectibles, and specifically with Pokemon. I'm gonna pay a little extra close attention when my kids open up those binders and start going through those
Snatch them
cards. Just
away. Yeah,
let me make sure those
that's right.
we're taking good care of those things.
That's right.
So
it's great. Now they have apps on your phone where you can just take pictures, and AI will tell you exactly what the card is,
yep, of course.
value. And so
Thing.
Well, I
it's
know what I'm
always
going to be
Go,
doing. I know what I'm
go
going to
get
be
them.
doing tonight.
Yeah, like, get back here.
All
If I
right.
need money, you call me
Yeah,
back.
let's see. Yeah, throw some. Yeah. Okay. Well, Jennifer, whether it's about collectibles or anything else for people's financial interests and needs, tell us how they can reach your
Yeah.
office.
We're local, as you said. We're here in the Triad, here in Winston-Salem. So you can call us 336-701-1600 is our number. You can check us out online. We're at Three Magnolias Financial Advisors with an S, and that's all spelled out. So check us out there, reach out. Be happy to talk to people, and help them prepare for those important things. And we'll try to have some fun along the way here too. We can even talk some Pokemon.
Yeah. Well, we got holidays shopping coming up here soon.
Oh, that's
So I
right.
know we're going to be
Yeah,
talking about that before too long, either on one of our next
right.
couple episodes. So
Give them
uh,
Pokemon cards and then take them back and put them on the shelf and never open
that's
them.
right. Give them Pokemon cards. Yeah. Tell them they give them a pack of Pokemon cards. That will, you can't open it though.
Put
You
it up
can't
on
open
the
it. Yeah.
shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Exactly.
can't be
Yeah.
looking in that. That'd be a very
Uh,
fun Christmas.
yeah. All right. Jennifer, Austin, thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Securities offered through Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Three Magnolias Financial Advisors, located at 110 Oakwood Drive, Suite 480, Winston-Salem, North Carolina 27103. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors and Private Client Services are not affiliated. Private Client Services is under separate ownership from any other named entity. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. All all economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. The market indices discussed are unmanaged. Additional risks are associated with international investing, such as currency fluctuations, political and economic stability, and differences in accounting standards. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only, and not necessarily those of private client services. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Private Client Services nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.